The morning mist clung to the 40-story glass of Barton Tech like a quiet warning. Inside, marble gleamed, heels clicked, and ambition hummed like electricity in the air. Dorothy Cromwell, 7 years old, golden hair escaping a neat braid, stood at the base of the building, one hand clutching a wrinkled envelope to her chest. Her blue eyes, crystal clear and unflinching, looked far older than the small body they belonged to. She, Dee, crossed the city on 2 buses and 1 light rail, carried by a mother's whispered instructions and a promise that this letter could save both of us. At the front desk, Margaret Harrison noticed the child before the child spoke. People looked different when they were on a mission. "Excuse me, ma'am," Dorothy said, pushing onto tiptoes. "I need to give this to the most important man in this building. Mommy says it's very, very important." Margaret softened. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Dorothy Cromwell, and this is for the boss man." She held up the envelope with both hands as though it might crack if handled wrong. On the front, in elegant script that shook near the end of every line, KEVINBARTON, CEO, urgent and personal. Margaret glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Mr. Barton is very busy." "Mommy said it has to be today," Dorothy whispered. "She might not be able to write any more letters soon." Something cold slid beneath Margaret's ribs. Protocol buckled under instinct. She pressed the intercom. "Mr. Barton, I have an unusual situation, a little girl with a letter. She insists you read it yourself." On the 40th floor, Kevin Barton pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled. 33, immaculate suit, a desk big enough to stage a negotiation on. The city sprawled beyond his windows, Elliott Bay, cranes, ferries, yet he rarely looked at any of it. He built Barton Tech from a cramped apartment to a juggernaut, and along the way had learned to move feelings into a sealed drawer. "Margaret, you know my calendar." "I do," she replied, steady but urgent. "I've never asked like this." "A beat, send her up." Dorothy gazed wide-eyed at the glass-walled elevator. "It's like being in the clouds," she breathed. "Stay brave, honey," Margaret whispered, hand on Dorothy's small shoulder as the doors opened on a hush of air. "He's just a person." The double doors to the corner office swung inward on Dorothy's knock. The room was all quiet power, mahogany original oil paintings, a desk that caught the light like calm water. Kevin looked up, ready to end a distraction. Then the world snagged. The girl's eyes were startling blue, his blue. The head tilt, the small, stubborn jaw, the dimple that appeared when she found courage. A mirror in miniature. "Are you the boss man?" she whispered. "I'm Kevin Barton," he said, voice low. "You must be the courier." She stepped forward and set the envelope on his desk with both palms. "Mommy wrote this for you. She says you have to read it right now." The paper was soft with handling. Lavender ghosted up from the fold. The handwriting tugged at a door in his mind he'd nailed shut 8 years ago. He opened it. "My dearest Kevin, I pray you will finish this letter before you judge me. I am Nancy now, Nancy Cromwell, but you knew me as Nancy Peterson. 8 years ago, we shared a night that became the most precious gift of my life. Our daughter, Dorothy. I am dying. The doctors say 2 months, maybe less. I have spent everything. Dorothy doesn't understand how bad it is. She is brave, too brave. You believed you were sterile. The doctors were wrong. Dorothy is living proof, born 9 months after the last night we were together. I never told you because you thought I'd betrayed you and you shut every door I tried. Please, if not for me, for Dorothy, she needs a father. Nancy Peterson Cromwell." Kevin's hands trembled. Nancy. The name was a strike to the sternum. Hallway laughter, a sunlit kitchen, hands clasped over foolish plans, and then photos, calls, hurt that hardened into certainty. He looked up at Dorothy. "How old are you?" 7, she said, lifting 7 fingers. 8 on December 15th. December 15th, exactly 9 months after that last impossible night. Before he could speak, the door opened without a knock. "Kevin, the Richardsons are?" Susan Osborne stopped. 30 and polished, all angles and red dress and careful hair, she took in the child, then the letter, then Kevin's face. Her color drained one shade, something calculating flashed and vanished. "Who is this?" "This is Dorothy," Kevin said carefully. "She brought me a letter from her mother." "From whom?" Susan's voice slid cool as glass. "Nancy," he said. It was less a word than a key in a lock. A moment of silence where everything in the room aligned, then shifted. Susan's smile tightened. "We're late," she said. "You can't." Kevin knelt to Dorothy's height. "Would you like to call your mom so she knows you're safe? I think I'd like to meet her." Dorothy's eyes filled with light. "Really? Mommy said you might be too busy." "There's nothing more important than this." "Kevin," Susan hissed, "you remember what the doctor said." But he was already dialing. "Margaret, clear my afternoon." Capitol Hill wore its grit with pride. Peeling blue paint, a hand-swept stoop, flower boxes that tried anyway. Dorothy took the stairs like she'd been born on them. "We're 3B, she said. Nancy opened the door. The sight rewrote the past in a single, painful line. She was thinner, hair ragged from chemo, eyes too large in a face that had known too much pain. But the smile when she saw Dorothy had the same warmth Kevin had fallen into 8 years earlier. "Dorothy, sweetheart," she whispered, crouching to gather her daughter. Then she looked up and the space between then and now collapsed. "Hello, Kevin." "Hello," he said, throat tight. "I got your letter." Dorothy watched the two of them like she might stitch a seam with her eyes. "Mommy, is this my daddy?" Nancy's hands trembled. "He's Kevin Barton," she said softly. "He's someone very special who knew Mommy a long time ago." Kevin knelt, the shape of Dorothy's face hitting him harder up close. The dimple, the eyes, his mother's nose on a child he'd never met. "Would you color for a bit while your mom and I talk?" Dorothy nodded, but Kevin suspected her ears would be close to the door. They sat, he on the small sofa, she in a chair pulled close enough to pretend the space between was smaller than it had been for 8 years. "Is she mine?" he asked, plain as a blade. Nancy didn't flinch. "Yes, I swear it." "They told me." "Doctors can be wrong," she said. "Or things change, I don't know. I only know she exists and she is ours." He exhaled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she said, voice cracking. "You wouldn't take my calls. Your assistant had my number on a list. The photos, what photos? And the whispers, and then you were gone. By the time I knew how to fight, pride and hurt were all that stood where we had been." He thought of a younger version of himself, all sharp edges and terrified certainty. His palms burned. "What do the doctors say?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the hallway where a pencil scratched paper. "Ovarian cancer. Stage 4, 2 rounds of chemo. There's an experimental protocol at SCCA. It isn't covered. It costs more than my life has ever held." "How much?" She named a number. Kevin's car had cost more. "Start it tomorrow," he said. "I'll handle the rest." Tears filled Nancy's eyes, stopped there and receded like a tide, refusing to show weakness. "Kevin." "For Dorothy," he said, "and for what we lost that I'm done losing." They did the practical things, called Dr. Michael Harrison for a discreet DNA test, scheduled the SCCA intake, arranged a daytime nanny for Dorothy. Then they did the human thing. They ate pizza in a booth that had seen enough families to hold their silence without judgment. "What do you like?" Kevin asked Dorothy as she arranged pepperoni into geometric patterns. "I like reading," she said, "and drawing and helping Mommy and asking questions. Mommy says I ask too many." "Curious people change the world," he said. Dorothy considered that. "Do curious people also get dessert?" "Yes," Kevin said, surprising himself by smiling. He carried Dorothy up the stairs asleep, the weight of her the exact measure of a sense he hadn't had a name for in years. He tucked her into a narrow bed under a faded quilt and watched her breathing settle. When he left, Nancy followed to the door. "If the test says no," she asked, eyes on her hands. Then we talk about adoption, he said. I've spent 8 years avoiding what I wanted because I believed I couldn't have it. I'm done doing that. For a moment, the old room, the old October light, the scent of her hair from the life on the other side of a lie, all of it gathered. Thank you, she said. It held everything they didn't say. Susan waited in the penthouse with a bottle open and a smile too bright. How was your field trip? She asked, pouring him a drink. Her name is Nancy. The child is Dorothy, he said, the way you say whether out loud so it's real. Nancy is sick. We're starting treatment tomorrow. I arranged a test. You can't have children, Susan said, as if he'd forgotten his own history. We have discussed this, Kevin. We built a life with that understanding. Maybe the diagnosis was wrong, he said, or changed. Or maybe a desperate woman found your name in an old journal, Susan replied. Kevin, I did some digging. Your Nancy was married 2 years ago to a Robert Fitzpatrick. She slid a folder across the stone. Marriage certificate. Photos, white dress, tall man, a kiss, a legal stamp for an annulment 6 months later. She didn't tell you that, did she? Susan asked softly. She lies, Kevin, it's what she does. His phone buzzed. Dr. Harrison, earlier than promised. Mike's voice was careful. Kevin, I rushed the work as you asked. Preliminary results are in. Kevin's lungs forgot their job. Tell me. Negative, no biological relationship. For a second, the world narrowed, a tunnel that only held the word no. He hung up without trusting his voice. Susan's hand found his shoulder with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry, she said, but better now than later. He stared at the city until the shapes blurred. It felt like 8 years ago and also worse, because hope had been real this time. His phone chimed again. Dorothy, Mr. Kevin, Mommy is crying. Did I do something bad? Please don't be mad at us. I can be better. He typed slowly. You did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups get confused. Take care of Mommy. Another ping. Will you still be my daddy even if you are mad at Mommy? He closed his eyes. He'd never wanted a yes to be true more. Kevin, Susan said, voice low, do not let this child manipulate you. Nancy is using her. Come back to reality. He turned from the window. Reality is that a 7-year-old crossed the city to hand me a letter that might as well have been a flare shot into my life. Reality is that I can't shake the feeling the test is wrong. Wrong, Susan laughed brittle. Science isn't sentimental. Science is also not infallible, he said, dialing. Mike, talk to me about chain of custody, who had access, any anomalies. A pause. Why, Kevin? Because Susan called your office asking about the process and timeline. Another pause, longer. She did. We refused to share details. Also, there was a brief power glitch yesterday. Some workstations rebooted mid-process. A few tests had to be re-entered. Rerun everything, Kevin said. New samples, independent lab, maximum controls. That will take. I'll pay. He ended the call and exhaled hard. The apartment felt smaller with Susan in it. You think I tampered with your test? She asked, voice frosting over. I think I don't know you as well as I believed, he said. Leave the key. He arrived at 3B with apology and a plan. Nancy opened, wary and brave in equal measure. I am sorry, he said. He let the words sit heavy and honest. I think the test was compromised. We're doing it again. New lab, maximum security. Her hand went to her mouth. Compromised by. Susan, he said, I can't prove it yet, but. Nancy's shoulders sagged in relief at the possibility of a world where she wasn't a liar. I didn't tell you about Robert, she added, eyes steady. I should have. I married him when Dorothy was 5 because I was tired and scared and she deserved a steady table. I told myself I'd grow into love. I didn't. I left rather than teach her a lie about marriage. That's the story. There isn't another. He believed her. It wasn't logic. It was the way her voice didn't wobble when it should have if she were inventing. They swabbed cheek cells under a tech's observing eyes. Samples sealed, barcoded, signed, and driven by Dr. Harrison himself, to an independent facility with redundant backups, backup generators, and protocols that would make a bank blush. Then they waited. Waiting turns minutes into liquids, slow, viscous, hard to swallow. Dorothy's school day stretched. Nancy's energy came in rationed cups. Kevin came and went, a constant who brought soup and books and a quiet that didn't ask for anything in return. That evening he read to Dorothy from a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web. She curled against his side and traced his palm with one small finger. "We have the same hands," she said, "so probably the same heart too." He swallowed. "Maybe we do." Morning brought a call. "Kevin," Mike said, voice different, solid. "The original samples were tampered with, polymer contamination that interferes with the markers. We ran the new set twice here and once at the independent lab. The result is consistent." Kevin's chest felt too small. "Tell me." 99.97% probability. She's yours." He closed his eyes and let the sentence fall through him like sunlight. Nancy was watching his face, a hand pressed to her own heart. "Kevin." "She's mine," he said simply. Nancy laughed and sobbed in the same breath. Kevin caught her, and for a long moment the room held only the quiet sound of two people who had been underwater too long learning how to breathe again. Dorothy burst in from school an hour later, backpack half-zipped, hair fuzzy with running. "Are you my daddy?" "Yes," he said, lifting her and spinning once, careful not to tug the tender thread of Nancy's smile. "I am your daddy." "I knew it," she said into his shoulder, "because you have my eyes." Happiness is a loud thing inside a small apartment. It knocks into furniture, it spills from mugs, it makes room where there isn't any. It also draws attention. That night, Susan arrived at the penthouse with a man whose cufflinks cost as much as a hatchback. "Kevin," she said, all graciousness, "this is Robert Fitzpatrick. He thought you should hear how your Nancy operates." Robert's story slid out practiced, polished by resentment. "She hides things," he said. "Uses sympathy. There's always a rich man in the wings." "Fascinating," Kevin said when he finished. "There's a complication with your script." He placed his phone on the counter and tapped the screen. Mike's email glowed. Paternity, positive. He let the silence fall after the word like a gavel. Susan blinked. Robert's mouth opened and shut. "Impossible," Susan said. "The first test was sabotaged," Kevin replied. "By someone who knew where and how to press, someone who called my doctor, someone who benefits if I do not have a family." Robert took a step toward the door. "I should." "You should," Kevin said evenly, "before you become part of something prosecutable." Robert left without looking back. 8 years, Kevin said to Susan. The numbers tasted bitter. "You were in my office then, you knew my passwords, you brought me photos, you told me who to call. I took it because it was easier than risk. You made sure I never doubted the wrong person again." Susan's mask cracked down the middle. "I loved you," she said. "She wasn't right for you, she'd have taken your focus, I kept you sharp." "You kept me lonely," he said. "Security will meet you at your office at 8 a.m. If anything from the lab visit points to you, I will press charges." "Kevin." "Leave the key," he said again. This time she did. The penthouse learned new sounds. The tick of crayons on paper, the chatter of multiplication tables, the sigh of Nancy sleeping on the couch after treatment while her daughter tucked a blanket around her. Kevin rearranged furniture, sold art that had never meant anything to him, hung frames that held kindergarten drawings. He learned the names of chemo side effects and the best kind of crackers to cut nausea. He learned that bedtime stories could heal something the past had broken. Nancy began the experimental protocol. The first week slammed her flat. The second surprised them with a day that felt like almost normal. They took it like an offering and walked the waterfront. Dorothy fed gulls and suggested names for every fairy. Kevin discovered his city for the first time with the sound of his daughters running commentary in his ear. At appointment 3, Dr. Martinez smiled over the edge of a clipboard. It's early, she cautioned, but your labs are responding. We keep going. Nancy nodded, eyes glossing with hope she hadn't let herself hold. On a rainy Thursday, Kevin paused in the hallway outside Dorothy's room. The letter, creased, lavender-dimmed, its edges feathered from living in a pocket and a purse, hung in a simple frame over a small desk. "It's the most important thing in our house," Dorothy said from her bed, watching him watch it. "But Mommy says it's also the smallest." "Sometimes small things are big stories in disguise," he said. "Like me. Exactly like you." 3 months changed shape. Hair began to prick Nancy's scalp like stubborn grass. Laughter came without apology. The scans said the word remission in a cautious voice that still filled the room like music. On a December evening shot through with cold, Kevin paced, then stopped, then paced again. He'd planned candles and a rooftop and a string quartet that would make magazines sigh. Then Dorothy peered up from math homework and said, "Daddy, are your feet okay?" Nancy bit her lip to stop a smile. "Yes, Daddy, are your feet okay?" He laughed, startled by the sound of it. "Actually, my feet are fine. My heart is full." "What does that mean?" Dorothy asked. "It means I need your help." He knelt, velvet box in hand, suddenly speechless. Dorothy gasped, "Is that what I think it is?" "That depends," he said. "I'd like to ask your mommy a question, but I need your permission first." Dorothy clapped both hands over her mouth, then sprang up, vibrating with glee. "Yes, ask, ask." Kevin turned to Nancy. The scripted speech, the poetic lines, none of it fit the way truth sat in his chest. "8 years ago, I let fear and a lie take everything," he said simply. 3 months ago, a little girl in a lobby gave me back my life. I love you, Nancy. I love our daughter. Will you marry me? Let me be the husband you deserved then and the father I want to be now." Nancy's yes came out as a laugh and a sob and a word all at once. Dorothy launched into a celebratory lap around the table, chanting, "We're going to be the Bartons," like it was a spell that could make time behave. June threw open a blue sky and told the bay to sparkle. Friends gathered on the penthouse terrace. Dr. Harrison, awkwardly dignified in a borrowed suit, stood with a small book and a big grin. Nancy wore simple white that made her look like the person she'd always been beneath the hospital light. Dorothy, in a dress the exact blue of her eyes, solemnly scattered petals with the gravitas of a tiny monarch. Kevin's vows were plain, each word chosen like a tool that would build something that lasted. "Nancy," he said, "I believed lies because they were easier than hope. You forgave me. Dorothy found me. I promise honesty when truth is hard, gentleness when days are sharp, and courage when fear tries to dress like reason. I will not let anything separate us again." He turned to Dorothy. "You brought me a letter and gave me a life. I promise to be the dad who shows up, who listens, who learns, and who never stops telling you that you are enough exactly as you are." Nancy's voice shook and held. "Kevin, I promise to choose us every day, to say out loud when I am afraid, to not let pride speak for me, to teach our daughter that love isn't perfect, it's patient." Dr. Harrison cleared his throat, redeemed a lifetime of boring checkups with one gleeful pronouncement, and kissed Nancy's cheek when he handed her the license. "Married, legally, beautifully, absolutely." They ate on the terrace. They danced. Dorothy interrupted the cake to deliver her own speech, which mentioned, in order, bravery, letters, gulls that steal fries, how good Mommy looks with hair growing back, and how she intended to sign her homework Dorothy Barton from now on. Everyone cheered. Late, with the city turning on its night jewelry, Dorothy tugged Kevin's hand. "Daddy, I have to tell you something important." He crouched, always. "I was scared the day I brought the letter," she said. "The bus smelled bad and a man yelled and I didn't know what your voice would sound like. But Mommy says being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." Kevin's throat tightened. "Mommy is right and so are you. Also," she added gravely, "I think love is like a secret code too, like the one from the test. Only you hear it in your heart." He pulled her close and breathed in sun, sugar, and the warm, impossible scent of a life that fit. Over her shoulder, Nancy watched them, hand pressed against her chest like she could hold the moment there and keep it safe. The letter hung over Dorothy's desk. The lavender had mostly faded, but the loop of Nancy's end still looked like a promise. Below it, in a child's careful print, a new note had been taped. Dear future me. Be brave, ask for help, write the letter. Dorothy. On weekday mornings now, the penthouse elevator opened to a different music. Cereal bowls, lost shoes, the debate about whether math is fun, the whisper of 2 rings against a counter as breakfast was cleared. On weekends, Elliott Bay glimmered and gulls angled for dropped crusts, and Kevin learned the names of constellations because Dorothy wanted to stand on the terrace at night and point. Nancy's scans kept saying the right words. They kept their appointments. They kept their promises. Kevin kept a copy of the first test result and the second, both signed and dated, both framed in his office. One to remember what a lie can cost, the other to remember what truth can give back. Sometimes, when the day was mean with little things, Kevin stepped out of a meeting and read the email Dr. Harrison had sent the night verdict came down on Susan's case. Convicted. Tampering, fraud, conspiracy. Consequences exist. Not because he loved punishment, but because he needed to remember that harm has a name, and so does justice, and so does hope. On Dorothy's 8th birthday, the 3 of them stood by a cake she'd designed with a fairy and a letter, and a ridiculous amount of blue icing. She made a wish so seriously the room held its breath. What did you wish? Kevin asked after the candles moldered into smoke. She grinned, gap-toothed and gleeful. If I tell, it won't come true. Tell us anyway, Nancy said, eyes dancing. Dorothy leaned in. I wished, she whispered, that other people with important letters will always find the right doors. Kevin looked at Nancy. Nancy looked at Kevin, some wishes you don't have to say out loud to keep. They went outside, where the bay breathed slow and the city clicked on and the future waited the way it always does. Ordinary until someone brave makes it extraordinary. Kevin tucked the blanket around Nancy's shoulders, slung an arm around his daughter, and felt the precise, perfect weight of what it means to stay. Dorothy tilted her head the exact way he did when he was thinking. Daddy. Yes. What are you thinking about? He smiled. How sometimes the most important things come in the smallest packages. Dorothy nodded, solemn as a judge, like letters and daughters. And second chances, Nancy added. They stood together, 3 shadows braided on the terrace tile. Behind them, on a bedroom wall, paper and ink held the day a child walked into a lobby and rewrote a family's fate. Ahead of them, gulls made ridiculous noises. A fairy cut a clean white line across the water, and someone somewhere pulled a pen from a drawer and began a sentence that would change everything. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this love story. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate it from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe. More stories are on the way. See you next time.